The Witcher, Season 2, Episode 3, What is Lost. Had the chance to watch this episode earlier today. Really liked this episode quite a bit. Probably not a big surprise if you've listened to my other reviews for the second season of Witcher so far. Yeah, I've definitely enjoyed this. And honestly, I think this episode might be my favorite so far. We got to see more of the relationship between Geralt and Ciri develop. We see Ciri kind of go into training with Geralt, and we also get to see kind of him develop more of as a surrogate father figure to her. So that was definitely cool to see in this episode. Also, we kind of got to see her interaction with more of the other Witchers at Kaer Morhen. So it's kind of cool to see her character developing from kind of a princess-type character into more of a warrior character. She's showing a lot of resilience towards the training, even though it's clearly a lot for her character to take on. So yeah, it's cool. I like what they're doing with her character this season. It's cool to see her kind of developing and becoming more of definitely a more well-rounded, interesting character than what I had initially pegged her as. Of course, going back and playing the Witcher 3 game, I knew her from that game, so I kind of knew what she was going to develop into. I just didn't know if it was going to be something that was going to happen this quickly. So I'm glad to see this happening early on in the season. So, yeah, definitely interesting to see that aspect of the story. And of course, it's cool to see Geralt showing more concern for Ciri. We kind of see that in the episode that he's wanting to take the training a little bit slow with her, doesn't want her to get too ahead of herself, and I think he's just trying to protect her from getting injured. Whereas some of the other Witchers, it kind of is pretty clear that not necessarily that they don't like her, but that they're not quite as concerned with his safety as Geralt is, at least not at first. But it does become apparent that they do at least care about her. We get to see them introduce her to the training obstacle course they have at Kaer Morhen, where she gets to run around trying to dodge these like wooden pillars that try to knock her off the ledge, as well as like these spikes, these turning spikes, one of which basically almost impales her, or it cuts her shoulder pretty good. So we get to see her overcome that obstacle, or at least work on trying to overcome that obstacle, and try to gain the respect of both Geralt and the other Witchers. So that aspect of the story, once again, definitely probably my more favorite aspect of it. Although I will say the stuff with Yennefer was definitely really interesting as well. I mentioned last time that her story was not as engaging, at least for me personally. I will say this episode, definitely, I thought it was much more interesting what was going on with her and the Council of Mages. I don't remember what their names are. But it's clear with the episode, we get to see that when she comes back to the Council of Mages and was reunited with Tissaia, so that's a nice little heartwarming moment to see in this episode. We also get to see that Stregobor, one of the other mages, is pretty suspicious of her after the fight that she was in season 1. It's clear that he doesn't trust her, that he doesn't trust the fact that she came back unscathed, and that she doesn't seem to, or that she was with Nilfgaard. She was with a bunch of Nilfgaard soldiers and then was captured by elves and somehow made it back unscathed. So he is, I guess, from his perspective, understandably not very trusting of her. We get to see a really interesting and kind of creepy interaction between those two, between Stregobor and Yennefer's character. As well as we get to see the Nilfgaard prisoner, the blonde guy. We kind of get to see what's kind of become of him in this episode. And to be honest, I kind of thought from what happened to him in the previous episode that he was dead. But it turns out it looks like Tissaia just tried to read his mind a little bit. That was a pretty brutal episode. It looked like she had dug her fingers into his head, so I didn't know what had happened there. But I guess it was just a trick that the mages used to try to get information out of people's minds. So it's actually a pretty badass move that they made. So I definitely liked seeing that too. But there was definitely a pretty dark aspect of this episode that I thought they were going to get into, and that was basically that they give Yennefer the opportunity to prove herself by being the executioner of the Nilfgaard prisoner. So that was an aspect of the episode that kind of surprised me, and I'm not going to give too much away with that, but I definitely thought it was going to go in a different direction with Yennefer and the decision that she was going to make instead of what they actually ended up doing. So that was definitely surprising. Not a bad surprise, a good surprise, but just, I wasn't expecting that. So, but yeah. And then, of course, we get to see a pretty touching moment between Geralt and Vesemir. They're going over the aftermath of what happened with Eskel in the previous episode and the fact that he was infected by a leshy, a tree monster, in the previous episode and became one, essentially, and tried to kill Geralt along with the other Witchers, and successfully killed a few, I believe, in the last episode. I know he killed at least one. I know there was a scene where we saw the body of one Witcher kind of pinned to the wall. So we get to see the aftermath of that in this episode, and particularly with Vesemir's character and the impact that it has on him. And we get to see some pretty heartfelt moments between him and Geralt that I really liked. I like when shows are able to kind of slow down and give you these quiet moments between characters. And so I'm glad that The Witcher isn't just entirely all action, and it's not just Geralt running around beheading monsters at every twist and turn. As much as I enjoy seeing that, it is cool to see them willing to take some time and slow down and allow you to really breathe in and get to know these characters a little bit more. It gives the world a more lived-in feeling, in my opinion. Like, these are characters that don't just exist within the show. These are characters that have their own lives outside of each episode, and I definitely like that for sure. It's a nice little touch that they added into the episode. Also, some pretty grisly scenes too. Like, we see Vesemir basically trying to perform sort of an autopsy on Eskel's body and trying to figure out what exactly happened. And we kind of see him performing some kind of, just not really experiments, but just trying to understand better what happened to him. But, it's requiring him to kind of remove pieces of his body. And it's a pretty gruesome scene to watch in many respects. So yeah, it kind of reminds me of the 8th season of I almost said The Witcher, of Game of Thrones, when Jorah Mormont has the grayscale disease and they have to remove it in that rather pretty gruesome scene. This doesn't get as graphic as that, but it just kind of made me think of that. I was kind of getting those vibes watching this episode. But yeah, like the stuff with Geralt, of course, good as always. And of course, it was nice to see we got a little bit of closure with the Eskel situation, where we got to see Geralt and Ciri basically go up against the creature that infected Eskel, because while wandering out in the woods, we kind of get to see Ciri develop more of her cognitive abilities that she has that have kind of been on display previously, but we didn't really get a good take. We didn't really get to get the full story behind them. Now we're kind of getting more of that, where Geralt's kind of helping her develop her powers a bit more, and so that leads them into the middle of the woods where they where they encounter the leshy creature that infected Eskel, which you can tell because it's missing the arm that he showed them in the previous episode. And so that leads to a pretty interesting and pretty creepy confrontation between Geralt, Ciri, and that monster. Leads to a bit of a twist ending that I'm not going to spoil for you, because again, I think it's best if you kind of experience it for yourself. But it was definitely cool. And again, like I said, it was cool to see them get that closure to, in a sense, avenge their fallen comrade. So yeah, I think that was definitely a really interesting direction they took the story in. So I definitely enjoyed that aspect of it for sure. Yeah, and honestly, in this episode, not really a lot of negatives, a lot of really good, really tense moments throughout the episode for sure. Yeah, I definitely enjoyed that part of it a lot. And I kind of felt sorry for Ciri's character a little bit, because she goes through this insane obstacle course, and the other Witchers are kind of just egging her on. At first, it seems like they're kind of just being mean to her because they know that she's going to fail, but it actually seems like by the end, they're actually giving her genuine advice on how she can do better. So that was cool. It's almost, you kind of see like she's building this camaraderie with them. At least that was the impression that I got. So yeah, and then of course, it's kind of heartbreaking at the end. Like, she makes it all the way to the very end of the obstacle course, but doesn't quite stick the landing, and Geralt's there to see her. So you can kind of tell, it seems like she's really trying hard to impress him, but he's just, not that he doesn't care, it's just that, Geralt, we all know how Geralt is. He's kind of a distant lone wolf figure, so he's not going to show emotion that much. So I kind of feel sorry for her in that regard. But again, it is clear that he does care about her. Okay, give me some water real quick. Sorry about that. I'm too lazy to mute the mic, so you're going to have to deal with it. But yeah, and again, not going to give away the ending with Yennefer's character in this episode, but it was definitely an interesting dark ending that she took, and an interesting twist that I wasn't quite expecting with her. I think it's clear that Yennefer is showing that she is willing to do what it takes to get her powers back. Because it looks like, at least in this episode, it's kind of revealed, although they've been hinting at the fact that she doesn't have her powers anymore. And she's very understandably frustrated in trying to get them back. And she's having visions of the witch from the previous episode who's telling her to come back to her, that she might know of what I would only assume is going to be a dark way for her to get her powers back. So definitely going to be interested to see how that goes. This episode kind of leads into that a little bit. So it's clear that Yennefer is proceeding down a dark path to get her magic abilities back, but we don't know exactly how that's going to play out or what that's going to look like. So I'm definitely curious to see where that leads to down the road. But as far as for her character development, it's definitely interesting to see. It's funny, even though I prefer Geralt's story more, I guess more for the action sequences, I do find myself in some ways kind of gravitating towards Yennefer as a character. She definitely comes off as this very human character, just given the fact that it feels like she's always got a chip on her shoulder and she's trying to prove herself to others, which I think many people can relate to. Whereas you have someone like Geralt who is very capable. Not to say that Yennefer isn't, but you almost kind of expect Geralt to perform these amazing feats of heroism because he's a witcher and he was trained to do that kind of thing, hunting monsters and stuff like that. But with Yennefer, it's like we've seen her develop and try to become stronger as a character from season 1, where she couldn't do magic at all, and then she became a pretty accomplished mage. And now in season 2, to see her lose her powers again, it's like it's heartbreaking, but at the same time, it does kind of put you in her corner because now you really want to see how is she going to get them back. Is she going to get them back? And if so, what is it going to cost her to do that? And what lengths is she willing to go to do that? So I'm definitely interested to see what they do with her character and how that develops further into the season. So, yeah, if I were to give a score to this episode, I think the last episode I gave an 8.5. I'm going to go ahead and, I'm going to give this one probably a 9. This one definitely held my interest throughout the entire episode. Any negatives I have about it would probably just be me nitpicking, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into that. But, yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's progressively getting better, and this was definitely probably my favorite episode of the season thus far, so I definitely enjoyed it for sure. So yeah, and also probably going to try to get episode 4, the review in for that, in later this week. So yeah, again, excited to see how this plays out. I know this is leading pretty much right into the next episode as far as like what's going to happen with Yennefer's character. I'm assuming the next episode we're kind of going to get to see like how that's all going to play out. So I'm definitely interested to see where that all goes in terms of the story. But yeah, it's funny, like watching this season, it's making me want to go back and play The Witcher 3 again. Even though it's been so long since I played that game, I wouldn't remember any of the story or the controls, so I'd probably have to start over. I don't even remember how many hours I put into that game. I know I got pretty far into it, and I never played the first two. But I know I've heard that they're great games, and I have several friends that love the books, so I think at some point I'll probably try to go back and read those eventually. I don't know if I'll do a review on books necessarily. Maybe books that I've read in the past, but again, it's kind of like why I won't do a lot of reviews for video games. It's just because I can watch a show or a movie much quicker than I can read a book or get through a game. So if I do post any reviews for books, then it's going to be pretty few and far between. I have read the first 2 books in the Dune series, and I also saw the movie as well. So that might be something that I do down the road where I just kind of go back and compare maybe the book to the movie, possibly, and just kind of see what I think about them. But I don't know, that might be something for down the road. But for now, I'm just going to focus on just shows, I think, and maybe just every once in a while a review for a book or a movie. So, but yeah. So yeah, definitely enjoyed the episode. I don't think I have to tell you that it's got my recommendation. Yeah, and I think there's 8 episodes in the second season, so almost halfway through. In some ways, I'm actually kind of bummed because I don't want it to end. I love watching the show. Again, I love Henry Cavill as Geralt, and I also like the actor who plays Vesemir. I think he's really good too, and of course the actress that plays Yennefer as well. Also, I feel like I need to give props to the actress that plays Desea as well. She's really good. Like just some of the expressions that she has in the episode, like when Yennefer comes back and she sees her for the first time. It's really you can definitely see like the look of just extreme relief on her face. Look up her name real quick. Desea actress. Mianna Buring or Mianna Buring. Yeah, she's phenomenal in this. I definitely think she's one of the standout performances, at least in my opinion. Like I definitely enjoy her as Tesea. She has like this almost kind of like motherly figure to her over Yennefer, but it's clear that she's obviously like kind of a dark character and definitely someone who's willing to do what it takes to basically get what she needs out of somebody. Case in point with the Nilfgaard prisoner. So yeah, I definitely have to give props to the actress on that. And then of course I do like the actress that plays Siri too. Again, I think she is. I think she's kind of an understated performance in the season. She has this vulnerability to her character, but at the same time, you can definitely see like her scrappiness, such as when she's training with the other Witchers, and just the way she has her little back and forth with Geralt. They could have easily portrayed her as kind of a damsel in distress, someone who almost needs Geralt around to help her out and to protect her, but I don't get that from her. Like even though she's still obviously learning and training and trying to get better at becoming a warrior, it's definitely clear that she has like that spirit to like that warrior spirit to get better. So yeah, I definitely like that about her. So I think, the actress that plays Ciri and then Tesea and then obviously Geralt, Yennefer, and then Vesemir. I think those are probably like the main performances that for me at least kind of stand out so far in this season. So yeah, I definitely have to give props to all the actors in that regard. So yeah. But yeah, excited to see where this goes. And it's funny, like I'm enjoying doing these reviews for the podcast, but I almost hate for the season to go through it too quickly, just because I know like it's been, I think like 2 years since the first season came out. And I think they've announced there's going to be a season 3 or at least a few more seasons. So, but I know it's probably going to be at least a couple of years between them, unless they film them all close together, something like that. Kind of like how they did I feel like they did that with season 7 and 8 of Game of Thrones, and I think they've been doing that with a lot of movies and shows where they split them up at the end. I think they try to film them pretty close together so that the release dates aren't too far apart. So hopefully, if we do get whenever the next season of The Witcher comes out, hopefully we won't have to wait too long on it. I guess time will tell. But yeah. So yeah, that pretty much concludes my review of the 3rd episode of The Witcher Season 2. So once again, everybody, if you like what you hear, feel free to like and subscribe. Catch you guys next time.